I'd like to thank you for watching our podcast in our study in the book of First Corinthians. Today we're in First Corinthians, the 11th chapter, starting with verse number 17. So get your Bibles out and join with us. Now, I want to go back to verse number 16. Verse number 16 is what we call in Bible interpretation a transitional statement. Basically, the Apostle Paul said, you know what, if you want to be contentious, I'm not going to argue with you. You know, in the first church that I served in, I served under a great man by the name of Dr. J.T. Parrish. And he used to have this statement. Now, this was in Western Kentucky, but he used to have this statement. He'd say some people would fight a circle saw if they thought they'd win. And you know what? I've seen so much fighting going on in churches over things that really don't matter. And the Apostle Paul has been talking about men being the head of the woman and all of this stuff. And then he boils it all down and now is bringing it together with his next teaching. And he's saying, you know what, if you want to be contentious, verse number 16, if you want to be contentious, I'm not going to practice that with you. And neither should the church of God. And then he starts out now in verse number 17, and he begins to teach about the unity of the church, and he begins to teach about what we would call the Lord's Supper. It says this, now in giving this instruction, I do not praise you. What's Paul saying? I'm instructing you now. I'm bringing you an instruction. And this is not going to be nice. I am not going to be there to pat you on the back. You know what? I think we need this kind of instruction in our churches again. Not to please men, but to correct them. There are things that need to be corrected in every church. And so the Apostle Paul says to the Corinthians, he said, you know what? This is going to be instruction. This is going to be teaching, but it's not going to be teaching that you're going to go home and say, oh, boy, I got blessed. Now you're going to go home and say, oh, boy, I got some things I need to change about my life. And he goes on, because you come together, not for the better, but for the worse. What's he saying? He's saying that when you come together, and by the way, the church at Corinth had a time where the whole church would come together. But notice what Paul says. He says, because you come together, and it's not for the better, it's for the worst. The word better here, it means to make things better. It means to help someone else. Let me ask you a question. And I want you to think about this, and I'm not trying to be condemning or anything like that. I just want you to think about it. Why do you go to church? Well, brother, I go to church because I just got to be blessed. You're going to the church for the wrong reason. Why do you go to church? Well, that pastor, he didn't bless me. Well, why do you go to church? The Apostle Paul is addressing a problem that's happened in the Corinthian church, and it's led to all kinds of problems, and the problem really is arrogance. The problem is pride. But the pride has come in, and people are going to church, and they're not going to church with the right reason. Some of them are going to church to argue. Some of them are going to church to parade themselves in front of all the other members. We'll find that out as we get into the study of the gifts of the Spirit. Why do you go to church? Do you go to church to make the church better, to help the church be better? That's what the Apostle Paul is saying. But now he's saying to these Corinthians, you're going to church and you're making it worse. You're making it worse. You're making it weaker. That's the Greek word here, blesion. And it means to make something weaker, to make something inferior. You see, when you go to church and you say, I'm here to be blessed, you know what? You're making the church weaker. Because you know what? You're making the church about something to minister to you instead of you there to help the church become stronger. Do you understand? We need to have a course correction, especially in the American church. And that course correction is basically this: why do you go to church? What's the reason? Pastor, what's the reason you go to church? Well, it's my job. Yeah, it is your job. But what is your job supposed to be doing? It's supposed to be making and building the people. Do you understand that the Apostle Paul is really confronting a major problem, and it's not only in the church at Corinth, it's in all the churches of God, going back to verse number 16. Now, let's continue our study. Verse number 18. For in the first place, when you come together as the church, when you come together as a church, in other words, he's talking about a united meeting of the church. I hear that divisions exist among you, and in part I believe it. You see, the Apostle Paul has been getting letters. He's in the city of Ephesus, and he's been getting letters from different people all this time. We've talked about that in our earlier studies of the book of 1 Corinthians. He's been getting letters, and he's been getting reports that there's divisions in the church. And he says, in part I believe it. You know what? I don't believe everything I'm hearing, but I believe some of it. I believe there's a problem in the church. And then he goes on in verse number 19, and he says, For there must also be factions among you, so that those who approve may become evident among you. What's he saying? He's saying there's factions. He's saying there's factions in the church. There's divisions in the church. And he says, so that those who approve. What's he saying? Well, let's take a look at this word factions. The word factions, we actually get our English word heresies from it. What's a heresy? A heresy is something that's meant to destroy the church, to divide the church. Heresies are always divisive. So the Apostle Paul says, you know what? I hear that there's heresies. I hear that there's divisions in the church, and that these factions are not necessarily theological in this case, but they're cultural. And these heresies have become evident. In other words, I am beginning to see the results of people coming to church for themselves instead of coming to church to help the church. It's making things worse. Now we're going to end because my time is up for today. Join us again tomorrow as we continue this study in the book of 1 Corinthians.